All right, thank you, Ariel, for that lovely introduction. I don't have much to add, but just to say welcome to everyone and thank you so much for joining us today. And we are excited to explore the world of plants and magic, so to speak, today on 11/11. This is a wonderful day to look at all of these things, and we're excited to see what Lauren has in store for us in terms of aloe vera, ackee, and soursop. Please post any questions I believe we'll be taking in the chat, and we will address those at the end of the presentation. All right, Lauren, take us away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. 11/11 does feel good for this. And it's funny, I woke up this morning and I was like, oh, it's going to pour. What a beautiful day to sit and talk about herbs of the tropics in the Caribbean. As I'm like looking out the window and it's the sky is open and it's super dark. So let's just envision that we are somewhere tropical as we dive into this. I'm going to share my screen. So thank you, Ariel, for that beautiful introduction. I am Lauren Burke. I am the CEO at Sacred Vibes Apothecary. I want to say I'm at Sacred Vibes Apothecary, but I'm not right now. I'm at Sacred Botanica, which is our magical shop in the neighborhood, which is located in Ditmas Park, the Flatbush area in Brooklyn. And we were established in 2009 by my mom. And Sacred is super, super important to us, but it has been just a place of connection in our community. We have been just blown away by the amount of support that we continue to receive and by the familiar faces that we see and the new people coming in. And so, yes, I love to spend time in our apothecary. It's just such a magical place. And really, it's an honor for me to be working in our family business alongside my mom. And so, yes, we do the important work of spiritual and physical health, and we explore this through the lens of social and racial justice. So the apothecary is our brick and mortar store. The idea is we have many, many potions and remedies for healing, but we also are really passionate about educating. And so that is a large chunk of who we are. Oh, I should mention that part of why I'm so excited to be here is because we are very Caribbean. The Flatbush neighborhood is a beautiful melting pot of folks from all over, but really it felt magical for us to have our apothecary in this area because there were so many folks who were seeking plants, familiar plants in the place where they have landed in Flatbush, Brooklyn. And so when we opened up in 2009, folks were so excited to be like, okay, this is where I know I can come and get my soursop and my cerasee. I don't need to ask my family members to ship me cerasee or get it the next time I'm in Jamaica, sort of thing, right? And so tonight, I'm really going to be talking about three major plants, aloe, ackee, and soursop. As I was on my way here, I was telling my grandpa, I'm like, oh, I'm going to be talking about aloe tonight. He's like, yeah, what do you know about aloe? I'm like, Grandpa, I do this for work, but he's just like, he is just so knowledgeable about plants, and he's just cannot believe that here I am 2 generations later, still interested in aloe and the plants that he grew up with. So, yes. So aloe, so many of us know about aloe. So I should start off by really saying that at Sacred, we are herbalists, but we are spiritual herbalists. And really what that means is we acknowledge that plants are living spiritual beings. And we really hold a deep reverence, right, for the spirits that we associate with these living beings. So yes, this perspective, I'm sure you will see throughout this workshop. For many, it's a new kind of idea to wrap their mind around, but for just as many, this is tradition. And so aloe is one of those things that is super common. Many people have worked with aloe in some way or another. And when we are asked to speak about what aloe feels like, many people would agree that it's super, super slippery, slimy. In herbalism, the energetic quality relates to coldness. It's bitter. It's something that is cooling, right? If you have any sort of redness or inflammation, that is something that you'll use to bring coolness to you. So that has a planetary correspondence with the moon and water and that sort of energy. Often we use the gel from the leaf or a dried powder, which is not tasty. I don't know how many of you guys have had the privilege of trying that, but it's not the best tasting thing, but most folks will use it externally, right? So the gel is in a lot of creams, products. A lot of people have the actual aloe vera plant and use it as a first aid, but as you will see, has many, many pharmacological constituents and actions and properties that I will not really go deep into because I know it could be a little bit overwhelming, but emollient properties just means super, super nourishing to our skin, right? Provides moisture, demulcent, that's again about that moisture, juiciness. So aloe has many uses, first aid, bruises. Internally, folks use it really for the gastrointestinal tract. And so it's used for ulcers, constipation, things like IBS. It is super antiviral. It is very helpful with parasites as well. So folks will take it internally for those sorts of things. Aloe is not one of those plants that we would regard as poisonous. Aloe vera, I should say, aloe vera is not poisonous, but it's one of those things that you would not want to be using aloe on a consistent basis internally several times a day because that can cause some problems, and pregnancy and lactation, it's best to avoid aloe because that sort of moisturizing, moving energy is not what you would want to do during pregnancy. Fungal infections, deep wounds, aloe is not, if you have a deep wound that probably requires stitches, aloe is not going to fix that for you, sort of thing. And so yes, that is, those are a few of the contraindications that are associated with working with aloe. I mentioned internal use. Many people work with the juice, and that is really 2 tablespoons 3 times a day for when you are working with a specific concern. That is not really how folks would use this on a day-to-day basis. You would use it for an immediate concern, like you have an ulcer or constipation, but not necessarily something that you wake up every day and you're like, okay, here's my daily dose of aloe. So aloe really, really has a rich history just throughout the world. Specifically in the Caribbean, I grew up with seeing aloe being used as a laxative every now and then just to clean things out. But aloe has a long, long history of being harvested in Aruba. And so yes, it is just super popular. And when we speak of aloe at Sacred, we always tell the story of Old Haig. So much of traditional plant medicine is really passed on through storytelling, myth, folklore in the Caribbean. And so this is a story that I grew up hearing. This is a story that had to be explained to me when my mother would describe how her grandmother would put her to sleep and leave rice grains at the door. And I'm like, why the rice grains? And so, yes, this is a story that I was familiar with probably since probably 5 years old. And it's interesting. I was like looking for images of Ohio, and I was like, oh, this could be a little bit scary for a child, but this is the type of storytelling that we do. So I will, yeah, let me tell you the story. So the Ohio is just a popular legend. We are from Guyana, but Ohio is really a story that is present in many, many countries across the diaspora. And not everyone will call Ohio, but the story is always similar, right? And so Ohio really speaks to an old woman that is living alone, sort of on the outskirts of a village and very rarely seen, often just closed up during the day and comes out at night, right? And is super scary to children, called the witch. But yes, the story goes, so late at night, when the village is asleep, a ball of flame revolving wildly as if spinning on an axis flies through the night sky. It circles and returns to its original position, hovering there. Over the home of her young baby or child, it checks the house. Any rice grains? No. So it enters, lulling everyone into a deeper sleep and sucks the blood, leaving behind black and blue marks on its victims and listlessness for a few days. Any unprotected home is a prime target. To protect your home, you would scatter rice at your doorstep or salt your windows, or both. She then turns into a ball of fire and heads to the home of her intended victim, entering through the keyhole. This is another thing. So the rice is one way of protection, but sometimes folks will leave a key in the door, right? Just to kind of close that hole. The Ohai cannot pass rice grains without counting them. And this can take her all day until the sun comes up. And so that is why the rice is a form of protection, right? Ohai will ideally sit there until the morning when it's safer, counting the rice before she can come into the home. As sunlight rises, she has to flee. She gets back into her skin and tries again the next night. Before she leaves her home, she is careful to store her skin in a mortar and pestle or a calabash for safekeeping. Should her skin be found, she would have a terrible time entering into it again. Pain, burning, and frustration was the harsh reality of having your skin burned or destroyed as you shapeshifted. If you were to find her skin, you can destroy it with salt and pepper. This would prompt the old hag to become skinless in her raw flesh, essentially seen. And then she would begin reciting, skin, skin, my skin, skin, come to me. After this reveal, the village would then nurse her back to health, anointing her skin with herbs to heal the burning. Aloe and coconut oil are just a few of the herbs chosen. And so this is why we speak of Ohio when we talk about aloe, because aloe is that sort of that plant that you would turn to, right, to soothe burning, to an antidote to fire, right? And so the themes of Ohio's story really speak about one being comfortable in one's own skin, right? And softness that can be provided by the aloe plant, being seen for who you are. Loneliness, isolation, bitterness, anger, those are kind of the emotions that are associated with this witch Ohio. And so, again, fire being cooled by this really just nurturing plant. Another thing is community, community love, community healing. There are people that are readily available in the village that are like, here's some aloe, we will nurse you back to health, right? And so this magical or spiritual use of aloe really is about managing fire, cooling down fire. It is rejuvenating or renewing for people who tend to get burnt out. and really is something that a lot of folks work with to manage their fiery personalities or fiery constitutions. A lot of creatives are like, when they're super in the zone or fired up with creativity, use this to kind of manage that. So it doesn't become something that is like totally out of control. And so yes, that is aloe. And then this theme of just duality is really present in the Olhaig story, right? Because Olhaig is not necessarily the village's hero. Olhaig is this entity that families want to protect their loved ones from, right? But at the same time, the village is there and present to be like, okay, Olhaig needs some care, and we're going to take out aloe and coconut oil, and we're going to nurse Olhaig back to health. And growing up, I could never wrap my mind around that. I'm like, so wait, we don't want Olhaig to come into our house. We don't want Olhaig to really hurt us, right? But when Olhaig is revealed and essentially powerless, we're going to nurse Olhaig back to health so that she can come back. So yeah, that was really hard for me to wrap my mind around, but it really speaks to the presence of this indigenous perspective of really things just existing, right? There are good components and evil components, and they can exist at one time, right? And so that is sort of what's happening with Olhaig. And this is similar to how a lot of folks would view plants from an indigenous perspective, right? We can see that there's many plants that have the potential to heal and to be very helpful and beneficial to us. But at the same time, if you use them differently, they can be harmful. And so it's not about, you know, really this plant being bad, or we should eradicate this, or this person or this old woman being such an evil person. But it's acknowledging, right, all of the parts and being like, okay, these two things can exist at once. And there's a way to protect or shield what I love, or shield myself from the harmful effects. I hope that is making sense. So really, there's no good or bad in that perspective, right? There just is, and there's ways to use the good to your benefit, and then there's ways to protect yourself from the harmful. So I mentioned that aloe is not one of those plants that you would deem as dangerous or poisonous. We can go into Walgreens and find an aloe product, right? But there are poisonous aloe plants, and this really speaks to the knowledge of being able to identify things. I remember reading an article about a blogger who found what she believed was aloe and took several bites out of the plant only to find that it was not aloe. It was agave americana, which is super poisonous, but resembled aloe. And so many people would see this plant on the screen and be like, oh, aloe vera, we could use that. No, this is actually one of the few poisonous plants in the aloe species, right? So this is Aloe elata here, but there are really three poisonous aloe plants, and they are rare, but they are present. And so often this just required a really keen eye to be able to differentiate between the aloe that we are accustomed to using and healing with, and the one that is not to be used. Ackee. So I was waiting for this part. Ackee is so good. If you are not familiar with Ackee, Ackee is a plant, but we mostly talk about the fruit when we speak of Ackee, right? So if you're envisioning Ackee, you're probably envisioning the fruit of the plant. It is really the star of Jamaica's national dish, Ackee and saltfish, and it is the national fruit, actually, of the country. With all of the fruit that Jamaica has, I thought it was so interesting that Ackee is the national fruit. you can kind of see the way it looks, it opens up. It's related to the lychee family. It is not sweet. It kind of has like a nutty flavor. And so it's mostly prepared in savory dishes. But yes, it is related to the lychee family. And it just has a super rich history in Jamaica specifically. Ackee is native to West Africa, and so its common name is derived from the West African name Anki, and it made its way to the Caribbean through the transatlantic slave trade. And it's really unclear whether it was brought by enslaved folks or was basically uprooted and was like placed on the ship with the enslaved folks. So not really clear how that's possible, but Ackee made its way to Jamaica and really a lot of countries in the Caribbean, and many countries in the Caribbean don't really utilize the Ackee plant, but they do in Jamaica. And then, so in 1793, Ackee was taken from Jamaica and brought to England for it to be scientifically studied. And at that point, it was renamed Blingha Sapida after Captain Blingha, which is really interesting. Ackee had its name, right? But with colonialism, a lot of plants that originated in Africa or many places had their names and then were renamed, right? And so if you are in an herbal program, you would be most familiar with a lot of the renaming. But Ackee's name held in Jamaica. Nobody, if you went to Jamaica and asked for Blingha Sapida, you probably wouldn't be able to find anything, but Ackee you could find. Ackee is poisonous in its unripe form. And this is something that really interestingly is not really spoken about in Jamaican or Jamaican families. It's just something that you eat. And really for me, as a child of immigrants, I probably wouldn't have known that unless I researched it. So after Ackee was really scientifically studied, it became clear that it has some compounds that can be poisonous. And this is, like I said, really present in the unripe form of Ackee. When folks eat Ackee, it is super nutrient dense. And when it's, prepared correctly with the ripe fruit, it is a wonderful source of protein, vitamin B, vitamin C, zinc, calcium, fiber, potassium. It's just really kind of a Jamaican superfood. And it offers digestive support, cardiac support, blood pressure lowering abilities, a nice boost of protein, bone health with that calcium, immunity with the vitamin C. And so, yes, it just makes sense why it would totally be a staple. But at the same time, it gets a rep of just being something that you should probably avoid if you come across, right? Because it's poison. Even to this day, Ackee was listed, I believe, as one of the top 10 most dangerous foods by the Times Magazine, right? So yes, Ackee does have that potential to be poisonous. And really, traditionally, when you go to harvest Ackee, right? Or if you want Ackee, you would have to know how to pick it. So Ackee contains hypoglycins, which lead to vomiting, which is related to the sickness called Jamaican vomiting sickness, which happens after one ingests Ackee that is not ready to be ingested. And this can definitely lead to death. This has happened. Most of the time, this occurs in children or elderly. For a super strong person who happens to come across Ackee, They may go into hypoglycemic shock. This affects the brain often and can lead to coma. So it is pretty serious. And so how does the national dish contain something that can be so poisonous? And really, it's about the knowledge of how to work with the ackee plant. So ackee definitely must be ripe. And when I say ripe, I mean overripe and prepared really properly to avoid this type of sickness. There's a Jamaican riddle that is really told to children, whole family members, about a father sending a son to go pick a wife. And he tells the son to only pick the ones that smile, because the ones that do not smile will kill you. And so this is truly related to ackee, right? This is describing to children and families how to go out and pick ackee, because it's basically simplifying and saying, pick the ones that are smiling at you, the ones that are ready to be picked. So really what it looks like is, let's see if I even have a picture. You can kind of see in this photo that it's open. A lot of times the ackee that is ready will be more open than this. It will be pretty much first open. It will reveal the inside of the fruit, which is the part that is consumed. The seeds are never to be consumed. The seeds hold the hypoglycans. And so that part is typically discarded, and kind of the outer casing is discarded, but the inside, the flesh, is what you're waiting for. And so, yes, when that is totally open and ready, nature will tell you. You will know when ackee is ready for you, right? And so, yes, that sort of knowledge is really what kept people safe. And this sort of riddle in passing this down to children or within families was not really meant for humor, but really kind of a life or death sort of scenario. If you want ackee, it's best that you know this riddle, right? Choose the ones that are smiling at you. And so this really drives home kind of this idea of trusting nature, harvesting from what's available to you rather than forcing harvest. To pick an unripe ackee fruit is kind of forceful, right? You got to kind of pull that off. It's not the one that has fallen and is like ready to be consumed, right? So this really, to me, is about knowing when to approach plants, right? Knowing when things are ready for consumption, knowing how to listen to nature. And so making this a practice, really, a lot of us are not going out and picking our food, right? And so we're like, how does this apply? But really having knowledge of what types of food are in season or what types of herbs are in season at a given time is kind of related to this, right? Like knowing what is available for us to eat right now is a theme that's kind of related to this. The FDA totally has regulated ackee in this country. So luckily, if you want to go to the store and grab ackee off the shelf, you will not be poisoned. It is super regulated. Ackee was not really allowed to come into this country until it was able to be tested very, very carefully. And so it undergoes like really, really strict processing and testing before it could even enter a can and make its way to us here. But yes. Soursop. So soursop, I hope many of us have had the privilege of tasting soursop. Soursop is so, so yummy. And soursop is really not something that would come to mind when you think of this fine line between something being super nutritious and beneficial to our health and being poisonous, right? Because on this slide, you see soursop has so many just healing benefits. This is just scraping the surface, really. This is not at all comprehensive of all of its benefits, but most popularly, it's become very, very popular recently for its anti-cancer abilities or anti-tumor abilities. And this, a lot of folks use as preventative, or really when they're undergoing cancer treatment. Soursop is used kind of like as a supplement, right, to help fight that. It's amazing at regulating blood sugar, and that's how it's used traditionally. Fresh soursop juice, if you're a diabetic sort of thing, and endocrine balancer. And so that is the leaf of the soursop, but the leaf and the fruit have very, very similar benefits. The leaf is where you would find the most concentration of those healing compounds. So the leaf is what medicine people or medicine women or healers would go to prepare medicine. The fruit is kind of what you would have in your household, right? You know, soursop is helpful. You might not have access to the leaf, but you can go ahead and consume the fruit, juice the fruit. And a lot of times the fruit is used for liver health. Now, the root bark of the soursop plant, which I have never seen, was used as an antidote for poison and all kinds of poison. So I thought that was very interesting. Not like a specific antidote for a specific poison. It's like, okay, if you were poisoned by something, the soursop root is what you would go to for that. Now, the seeds are used mostly externally, but helpful against parasites, worms, lice, that sort of thing, and then used in small controlled doses to halt excessive vomiting. So this is like small amount, a pinch, right, to help with excessive vomiting. And often when you are working with these plants that have these dual components of just being able to heal, but also harm you very quickly, that's what you'll see. You'll see a small amount of the plant is used in a very, very intentional way, right? And so the seeds, soursop, as it's become a lot more popular, has become very, very controversial because a lot of testing has been done about the soursop seeds. And what basically happens is in a lab, you will extract the components from the seeds, test that and say, okay, yes, this has toxins, right? And so the seeds contain toxins. And often when you're working with the soursop fruit, I would say traditionally, you're not eating the seeds. You pick the seeds out. If you're juicing soursop, you're not going to throw it in whole. Traditionally, you do remove the seeds, right? However, when things come up like parasites, worms, lice, or that excessive vomiting I was talking about, that is when you would go to the seed, right? And so you would grind down the seed. And for external things like lice, head lice, you don't really have to be very careful about how you use that, right? But you do have to be careful when you are going to eat soursop seed powder to halt your vomiting. So this testing that's done, yes, reveals that there are toxic compounds in the soursop seed. Does this speak to the whole plant? I don't think so. I think that often, traditionally, you really learn how to utilize the whole plant, right? And this goes back to pre-colonialism. When you have something that you have sown by seed in your garden, you're not just going to take the leaf, right, and go, yeah, just use the leaf and that's it, right? You really took the time to sow this soursop by seed, and you are thinking of like, okay, how are all of the ways that I could use this plant? So you know that you can use this plant in tea. You know that the root is available if you ever do need that antidote for the poison. You're going to eat the fruit because it's lovely and yummy, right? And then the seeds are available if needed. Now, this sort of extracting from the seeds to kind of test the benefits of the soursop plant is is really not comprehensive of the healing benefits of the whole plant. But yes, it is definitely acknowledged and known by folks that the seeds are toxic, and that is why the seeds are used to protect your garden, right? So folks will grind the seeds and they're like, okay, we know this is toxic. This is what we're going to put out to prevent insects from eating up in our garden, right? This is how we're going to get rid of head lice. And so really that knowledge of how to use the plant, which part of the plant is useful for a specific ailment or specific reason, is what I believe is so powerful, and knowledge that should be shared or should be understood when looking at these plants. And so soursop is not a North American plant. I know I'm on an herbal listserv, and I remember last year someone was like, "Oh, I got these soursop leaves. Anyone have any idea how I use them?" And so there is this excitement to work with soursop because it's so enticing, right? And so you get it, and you're like, "Wait, actually, how do I use this?" And so the knowledge of working with the whole plant is what is beneficial when you are considering that fine line between it harming you and it being beneficial. And so this is not something that is typically in textbooks or something that you can just Google. This really comes from speaking with people who have been working with the soursop in its whole form for years. And so, yeah, I love soursop. I recently started working with the leaves, but I say, if any doubt, work with the fruit. Start with the fruit, right? That is a way to certainly introduce that. And when I think about its use as an antidote for poisoning, it really makes me think about some of the antidotes that we have here in North America. When we look at poison ivy, for example, or stinging nettle is not a poison, but it causes a reaction, we will often find its antidote, jewelweed, growing right near it, right? If you have poison ivy, you can bet your bottom dollar, if you look to your right, jewelweed is growing very, very close to poison ivy. And unfortunately, with colonialism and just the removal of native plants from their habitat, that sort of knowledge of like what to do if you have encountered any sort of reaction or poisoning is kind of is removed, right? Soursop, there may very well be an antidote for soursop seed very close to it, right? There may very well be an antidote for ackee near to it. We haven't found it yet. But that sort of idea of like nature being super just knowledgeable and providing the cure for poison very, very close to the plant is just so beautiful. And so, yeah, I think about that often. I'm like, how are we so lucky to have this, like, these natural antidotes for us right there. I wanted to also say that connection with land is super important when we are thinking about like working with new plants or herbs. A lot of time, like I said, soursop has become this thing that's like, people will come in and be like, do you have soursop? Or even I'll notice what's really trendy right now. Maybe blue lotus, for example, right? Things that we can't really grow here, folks are seeking. But I'm always like interested of why people are going to certain herbs, right? And so if you're looking for something for relaxation, a lot of the times you don't need to go for something that is so not local to us, right? and think about something that is grown within our vicinity. And just sort of like acknowledging, like, what are the sort of plants, if any, that I've seen my grandparents work with? What are sort of plants that are kind of ancestral to me? And really kind of diving into those and see if you can kind of put two and two together, like, oh, my grandma would drink this at this time of the day. Maybe it helped her with this sort of thing. But yes, that is, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. That is Soursop, Ackee, and Aloe. Any questions?
Thank you so much for that, Lauren. As you were speaking, I found myself thinking about like ancestral knowledge and community or shared knowledge and how much I consume, but without intention. Soursop is delicious. Ackee is delicious. So I have my own list of questions I would love to ask, but as you said, we'd love to hear from anyone participating today. Does anyone have any questions? Please feel free to chime in the chat if you have any questions for Lauren. If I can start off with a question. You mentioned aloe. Is that a plant that can be grown indoors? And as you mentioned, things that we might be able to find in the community.
Yes, aloe can be grown indoors. It does pretty well indoors. It's so funny. A lot of folks assume that aloe needs like a desert environment to thrive, but no, it can do very well. It's one of those low maintenance plants that you can have indoors, and it'll be there with you forever. My aloe plant has moved apartments with me. And for some reason, aloe seems to be a kitchen plant. I'm saying some reason, no, it is a first. So if you burn yourself in the kitchen, aloe is probably helpful to have in the kitchen. But I know so many people that have aloe in their kitchen. It's like this unspoken rule.
Nice. It's nice to know because sometimes some plants are a little intimidating. So it's nice to know the things we do have access to.
Yeah, aloe is very accessible.
Thank you, Roger from the UK. Welcome from the UK. Says he has no questions, but he enjoyed your presentation. Thank you so much. Yes, and please keep inserting your questions in the chat. And I'll keep going with my questions if no one else has any for you. How do you at Sacred Apothecary, you speak about the importance of like ancestral knowledge as well. And I know we are so far removed from those things to like native plants and access to those plants. How do you all, or I guess, what's your perspective on the importance of that generational knowledge? How do you keep it in the community?
Yeah, we are storytellers, right? So that's why I thought it was so important to tell the story of Ohio tonight, because that's a really just great way to like involve family in stories. The stories that I sat and I listened to from my grandparents, I can tell to my children, right? And it's like a room full of generations listening to the same stories. I always say to try to kind of remember, like, I know so many people are like, my grandma drank this tea. I don't really know what was in it, but I know it was red, right? And so they'll go on this whole long kind of journey to pinpoint what that red thing was. Come to find out it was hibiscus or something like that, right? And so I'm always like, try to pinpoint like one thing that was really familiar from your childhood. And so for me, it was always like lemongrass tea. I never realized that that's what I was drinking growing up. And now when I taste lemongrass, I'm like, that's the nostalgia. And so trying to connect with memory was really, really helpful for me in like working with ancestral plants, but also being present to stories, asking questions from older generations, and yeah, sharing those stories.
Thank you. So true. Lemongrass is also a really good one that I think, delicious, especially when you make it like from the lemongrass, like boil it. And
yes, that's how I grew up drinking. It makes a difference.
It really does. I agree. I agree. I do want to ask, how can people, so we can maybe insert it in the chat for everyone, how can people keep up with you, and where can people find you and connect?
So we can be found, we do a lot on Instagram these days. So at Sacred Vibes Apothecary. We spend a lot of time there making medicine, just really showcasing what we're doing. So say at Sacred Vibes Apothecary is our Instagram, sacredvibeshealing.com is our website. And there a lot of folks will look for some more information about our apprenticeship program. That's the place to go, like if you're someone that's interested in learning about herbs and want to dive into that, that's there. But yeah, those are the two places.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Or in person.
Right.
In person,
Show up, right?
Yeah.
Please do. That's sort of the best way. It's better when you can just have that experience, see each other face to face, and really talk more. It was an honor and such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And Tashima Thomas, again, our curator, one of our curators for Flora Fantastic. Do you have any words of closing as well?
Oh, this was wonderful. If we just have like a couple seconds, I'd love to hear about lemongrass. And can you just kind of go over a couple things, and in the right climate, it can grow so fast. So can you tell us like just a little bit about
lemongrass. So first of all, people drink lemongrass a lot of time for the taste, for the flavor. They incorporate it into teas that may not be so good tasting, like, right? So like teas for like detoxification and like cleansing the liver sort of thing. If you add some lemongrass in there, it's a little bit more palatable. Lemongrass is amazing as a febrifuge. So it lowers fevers. So that is a lot of times how people will use lemongrass traditionally. Like if you have a cold or you have a fever, you will go outside, get some lemongrass, make some lemongrass tea, right? Because it helps. Yeah, it's a sort of thing that encourages sweating and releasing that way. So that's another reason why it's a part of like detoxification blends. But yes, most notably, people will work with lemongrass for fevers, but also relaxation. It feels good to drink. A nice night tea.
Very good. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. And thank you everyone for joining us too.
Thank you all for joining us this evening.
Thank you again to Tashima Thomas. Thank you again, Lauren Burke, Sacred Vibes Apothecary. Yes, show up, show out. We'd love to see you there. And we'd love to see you all at Apex Art if you have a chance. You hope you have a wonderful night. Thanks, everybody.